All right, welcome everyone to the July edition of Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. I'm Caroline Richardson, Program Assistant for the Extension Master Gardener program here in North Carolina. And it's my pleasure to welcome you today. We will begin with a few announcements from myself. And then today we have the pleasure of a guest speaker, Mitch Woodward, to talk to us about small-scale stormwater solutions that we can share with homeowners. After that, we will move on to our BOLOs, be on the lookout for, in July and the month ahead. Today we have Matt's BOLOs pre-recorded because he is teaching a course this week, but we will have Mike's BOLOs live with us. After that, we'll move on to our Plant These Instead feature with Charlotte Glen, and then we'll wrap it up with EMG program announcements as we usually do. Okay, just give me 1 minute to look for our co-host. Okay. Seems like our guest speaker is having a little trouble joining. So I'm going to shake it up and proceed to our recorded BOLOs from Matt. We'll do that while we wait for that to resolve itself. So moving on to here.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I won't be able to be there live with you all this morning. I'm out helping lead the Plant Problem Diagnostic short course for ag agents, but I'm here to tell you in recording format about some arthropod BOLOs for August. So again, you're going to keep seeing and hearing cicadas as well as their hunting wasps. They're very large hunting wasps, cicada killers. So be aware that if you see these very large wasps, they may be intimidating, but they are not dangerous and not aggressive. And cicadas themselves are not dangerous to plants and are part of our summers here in North Carolina. And obviously have to fend for themselves against these cicada killers. You're also going to probably start seeing some of the larger caterpillars out and about. They've had some time to feed now over the warm season, and so they're going to be probably their largest soon, and many of them are going to be preparing to pupate, and so they'll be crawling from the trees down to the ground. You may see some large prominent caterpillars, hickory horn devils, and other giant silkworm moths like oak worms and whatnot around, out and about on plants or climbing down trees or aggregating on trees. You'll also see a lot of fall webworms creating large webs in trees. And these caterpillars are typically mostly just an aesthetic causing aesthetic damage. They're not going to harm the trees too much, but they just look bad in the trees. In the garden, you're going to be seeing some other caterpillars like parsley worms or the young of black swallowtails, squash borers perhaps, hopefully not, hornworms, cabbage worms, all different caterpillars again in your vegetable gardens and flower beds are going to be feeding on plants as well. And again, this is the season for young caterpillars to be storing energy from their food and then pupating to become adults, many of which are going to pupate in the ground and overwinter until next year. Along those lines, there are many active insects and spiders and other organisms that have been growing through the season. They started off young in the spring, and now we're going to actually begin to see them at their full size. So you may start to see full-size mantises, garden spiders, katydids, and crickets, a lot of things that are kind of basically full grown, now out and about feeding and mating and whatnot. Along with that, you may see social wasps and solitary hunting wasps out and about, again, creating nests for their young while the season is still good. And the social wasp nests like yellow jackets, paper wasps, hornets, and also the bee nests, the social bees like bumblebees and honeybees are going to be among the largest in the year around this time. And soon after are going to start producing mating reproductives that are going to go out and mate and overwinter. I've actually gotten a few calls already and emails about yellow jackets nesting in people's walls. So again, this is the time of year when you see a lot of activity because the colonies have many members in them at this point. And of course, there's lots and lots of other arthropod activity. So you're going to see all different types of insects out and about, coming to your porch lights, maybe coming in your home. Some are a nuisance, some are beneficial, some are neutral. So just keep an eye out on them. And lastly, just know that you may also have to keep an eye out for spotted lanternflies, which are now established in Forsyth County. And NCDA and other folks are out there looking at the site, making sure they know what's going on there. But that doesn't mean that they might not show up other places as well. We're also looking at Joro spiders perhaps being identified in the state, or at least being noticed, because even if they've got to the state when they're younger, they were small enough not to be noticed. We have seen sightings of the golden silk spiders in the coast, very similar looking spiders, but the two or a couple records that we've had previously in North Carolina were all around the Charlotte area last fall. So keep an eye out for them. Again, the Joro spiders are basically harmless. They're just very large, impressive spiders, and you shouldn't really have to worry about them. The lanternflies are going to be more of a nuisance and perhaps a pest for some plants, but really it's their nuisance issue that is the biggest problem. So them building up large populations on plants, producing a lot of honeydew, some city mold, and just generally annoying people. So that's all I have for this morning, and I hope you had a great session, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Excellent. We thank you, Matt, for that. And Mike, would you be willing to go ahead with your portion just to keep the bolos together?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to
do
stop the
that.
share. There you are.
One moment. So can everyone see the disease bolos for August title slide?
Yes, that looks good.
All right, I guess everybody's in a different place than usual today. You'll notice that I'm wearing the lab coat and the mask. Since Matt's away and Swarna is also on the field trip this morning with the county agents who are doing their diagnostic training, I am here in the lab with Chuck, and we are still required to wear masks in here. So I hope everyone is well. I got a little shy of a ½ inch yesterday. We had a nice thunderstorm, lost power for a little while, but man, that was an appreciated ½ inch of rain. We've been missing. Southern Wake County has not been getting the kind of heavy rains that Northern Wake County is getting. So for those who are unfamiliar with bolos, of course, it stands for be on the lookout, but we just go very briefly through some of the things that you may be noticing and getting questions about during the upcoming month. And if you want a complete list of what we've compiled of diseases and a few pests in the on the website, so just go to our PDIC webpage, and on the menu at the lower left of the beginning of the screen there, you'll see the Bolo link. 1 second here. Wonder why I'm not advancing. There we go. The Bolo link there in the red menu. So first of all, a Bolo quiz. Let's see if we can launch a poll. So what do you think you're looking at here as far as what do these leaves of leucothry and tulip poplar have in common? Is it aphid feeding injury, bacterial leaf spot, sarcospora leaf spot, downy mildew, or powdery mildew? Give folks a chance to look at that and think about it. See, we have a good number of participants today, 105 at the moment. Not quite as many as we have for the tomato show. That was extremely popular, of course. And we'll give this just another few seconds. 10. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Did the results post?
Yes, they did.
All right. Well, I didn't think this one was going to be as difficult as this, but yeah, this is actually powdery mildew in both cases. So, although there are aphids feeding on the tulip poplar, but the thing that's interesting here is these are both unusual presentations of powdery mildew. On the leucothry, one of the things you'll see is the red leaf spots. And so you always want to make sure and check, in this case, on the underside, because powdery mildew can be on the upper, under, or both. And you want to check on the underside to look for evidence of the fungus itself. And on the tulip poplar, I'm not sure exactly why it does this. Maybe it's the maturity of the leaves when it's being infected, but it will form these colonies, roundish, but they have a pattern to them, kind of a branching pattern. And it turns out that that's actually the powdery mildew. And you can see some of the aphids and dead aphid skins on that enlargement as well. And that's not to say that these two are the same powdery mildew fungus. They're not. These fungi are fairly host specific. The same one gets on rose as gets on peach, for example, and possibly also, I think, yes, on blackberry. But in most cases, it's going to be specific. So the ones on oaks are going to be on oaks. The one on grass is only going to be on grasses, and so forth. So into the bolos proper here, the general bolos to be on the lookout for in the landscapes are, of course, the sooty molds and the dog vomit slime mold. So the sooty molds here illustrated on the right. You can see some English ivy there with the layer of it, and the tulip poplar, where some of it is washed off and it's only kind of hung on the veins there. But in either case, in order to diagnose this, you just rub those spots. You don't have to scratch them with a fingernail or anything like that. Just give them some good firm pressure rubbing with your thumb. And if it comes off and the tissue is green underneath, and that's what you've got. So this is a secondary saprophytic fungal development usually on insect honeydew that's dripping down from higher on that plant or from some overstory tree. And the dog vomit slime mold, or Fuligoseptica, that I haven't seen too much of this year, but now that we're getting rains, maybe we'll see some more. Very typical in our mulched beds. Starts out with a very frothy yellow color. This is not yellow mass of the fruiting body. You don't see what's called the plasmodium phase because it's hiding out there in the mulch, oozing around, just kind of engulfing bits of organic matter and bacteria and so forth. It's not causing any harm. You can stick your finger. I remember when my son was little and we saw some of this down toward the beach, and can I touch it? Yeah, sure. And stick his finger in it. So this is not harmful. As it ages, it develops a sort of a crust on it in terms of pale color, almost a very pale peachy color. But inside, if you break it open, you see the dark spores that are wind blown, and that's how the organism disperses. This is not a true fungus at all. Slime molds are unrelated to the true fungi. And none of them are plant parasites. All right, in the flower bed and in the ground covers, a few things that you may see during the month of August on annual vincas. Of course, the Achilles heel of those is Phytophthora root rot and aerial blight, pictured there on the right. And occasionally you'll get something similar looking, but it's not the same Rhizoctonia aerial blight. With Rhizoctonia, though, you would tend to see the leaves kind of matting together more, and may even see some of the fungal hyphae on there. The stems are are also affected with Phytophthora. So you see kind of the browning there into the, not just leaves, but the stems, and you can have root rot with it as well. On Pachysandra, there, second picture from the left on the bottom, Volutella blight. These are leaves of some Pachysandra that I just picked yesterday in front of Williams Hall here on campus. And one of the keys to this disease is, since Pachysandra doesn't like sun, if they get too much sun, they're going to be more susceptible to this particular disease. On Rudbeckia, lower right there, Septoria leaf spot is probably going to be quite common. And maybe with some additional moisture here, you might start to see, or you might see some downy mildew. They can look a little bit similar, but it's more likely Septoria leaf spot that you'll be seeing. The zinnias just can get alternaria leaf spot and xanthomonas leaf spot, which can get up on the petals as well. And of course, powdery mildew is on many of our hosts. The coreopsis is the one illustrated there on the bottom, second from the right. With the trees and the shrubs, well, on multiple hosts, we'll be seeing heat and drought stress. So that's what's going on with the dogwood pictured there on the upper right. Improper planting, J-rooting, girdling roots, etc., are always things to keep in mind as possible causes of our tree and shrub problems, as well as Phytophthora and Armillaria root rots, which will or can show up at any time of the year. Flowering cherry. So this time of the late summer, we may see defoliation, premature defoliation with shot hole going on. And so you see those that look like a little bit like insect feeding, but they're actually, if you look carefully, they're necrotic or dead spots that are falling out. And we also see, well, many times of the year, some of these flowering cherries just give up the ghost and collapse. This is due to multiple factors, and one of them being that they're not particularly well adapted in all of our state, or parts of our state. So that can be hard to come with get a specific diagnosis on, but these are things that you will be seeing. On oaks, bacterial leaf scorch, pictured in the lower right, as well as slime flux. I didn't put a picture of here, but you know, the ooze coming out of the trunk, attracting insects. And you may see some Tabacia leaf spot as well on the oaks as we get later in the season. And of course, powdery mildews, especially on flowering dogwood, on euonymus and saucer magnolia. And then at the top of the segment here, I showed you the atypical powdery mildew appearance on leucothuis and on tulip poplar. Oh, here's an interesting one. Chinese fringe flower, lower petalum. So there's a really common leaf spot caused by Pseudocircospora liquidambaricola, which you can gather from the specific epithet there. The second part of the name also occurs on sweet gum, which is in the same family. This is not a particularly important disease though, but the next one is, and this picture is of a sample that came in, kind of a sad story where a landscaper bought and installed, I think it was 50 loropetalums at a site, and most or all of them were diseased. They had this loropetalum knot caused by the bacterium Pseudomonas amygdalae pathovar loropetalii. And this one is specific to loropetalum. So as far as I know, it does not get on any other kind of host. The sad part of the story though, I mean, I guess it was kind of sad already, but even worse. So they took all those out. They asked if there would be any problem in just going ahead and replacing. And I gave my opinion on that, which is that it'd probably be all right. But the new material from a different nursery, they found at least one that was also infected. They probably noticed the small branch that broke at the gall, and so it was flagging, it was wilting from that point forward. I don't know if they looked inside and noticed the big galls on the base of the main stem. So this is something you always want to be looking for when you're dealing with loropetalum or when you're purchasing it. On the fruit trees, so Marsonina leaf blotch, you may be seeing on apples. It's related to the fungus that causes black spot on rose. And you can see, at least at this stage, it has very similar appearance and can cause yellowing and leaf drop. On apple fruit, bitter rot, you can see in the picture on the far right, and the large blotch there, and also some fly speck on there. And maybe, I don't know if there's any sooty sooty blotch, but you see some fly speck there, which of course is just in the cuticle and cosmetic. With grapes, on bunch grape, black rot is a disease of the fruit, and you can also get downy mildew. With the muscadines, black rot causes a leaf spot, and same fungus, and both kinds can get Pierce's disease, which you see in the photograph there on the right. It can be a very important disease in grape production. And if there's still peaches around, you'll be dealing with brown rot and scab on the fruit. In the vegetable garden, beans may get some anthracnose, may get some cercospora leaf spot here. Those green beans are just such generous plants. They keep trying and trying with their last ounce of strength. They'll try and give you one more bean. But late in the season, we start seeing some of these leaf spots start taking over. On the cucurbits, downy mildew, last week, I think it was, yes, last week there were a couple of counties in the mountains, if I'm not mistaken, that were now confirmed to have downy mildew on cucumber. It's the beginning of June when it was found in Sampson County, and I think maybe one other out in that part of the state. So you've been dealing with a while, but folks in the mountains now have to be on the lookout for downy mildew. This is a disease or pathogen that does not overwinter in North Carolina. It has to come in every year and get started afresh. Powdery mildew, of course, also common on cucurbits, especially on the squashes and pumpkins. You can see it one on the gourds there in the far right picture. Tomatoes, we talked plenty about tomatoes last month, but keep an eye out for bacterial leaf spot, septoria leaf spot, and now later in the season, gray leaf spot caused by the fungus Stemphilium. Early blight and late blight would be on your lookout. Not so much that we see late blight. It's very rare that we see it in home gardens in North Carolina, but because of its importance, you do want to keep an eye out on it. Wilts continue to be a problem, or can be, so we'll be seeing the last of the bacterial wilt for the year in the coming month. And also you want to be watching for the possibility of fusarium wilt, especially on your heirlooms, and growth cracks as the fruit are developing, and there's different reasons why those can occur. I had planned on cutting and pasting those into the chat. I'll try and do that later for you, for those two links on the downy mildews and cucurbits and on the late blight. Just two others real quick for multiple vegetable crops, three others. Nutrient deficiencies as the season wears on, root knot nematodes, always check the roots, and southern stem blight, which you see pictured here, the mycelium, also the beginnings of the sclerotia there. They start out like pills on a bad sweater, white color, and then they mature to kind of a reddish brown. They're about the size and shape and color of radish seeds there attached to that diseased stem, that decaying stem. Turf grass, brown patch on fescue and ryegrass under stress because of the heat. That fungus operates. And then large patch is I'm not sure if it's exactly the same or just a related fungus, but it affects the warm season grasses as they start to become stressed especially. Fairy ring, any turf grass, any time of year, with or without the actual fruiting bodies. And gray leaf spot on fescue, ryegrass, and St. Augustine grass. This is not the same fungus. This is Pericularia gricia. It's not the same fungus that causes gray leaf spot of tomato. Summer patch or root disease on Kentucky bluegrass and fescue. And you may see some rust on some turfgrass species as well. So with that.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Let me see, I wasn't watching the chat as we were going through it. So let me take a quick look here. Oh, Julie says downy mildew just took out my cucumbers in Catawba County. So it's more widespread than I knew anyway. Because it was, I think, Avery and I forget which other were the ones that were reported last week.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you watching that chat for the next couple minutes. I am going to take us back to just one announcement before I introduce our guest speaker, and that is to look ahead at next month. Next month is our August Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. And this is the one where Mike and Matt are kind enough to answer your questions. So this is the opportunity to submit photos of pest or disease issues that you might be seeing in your garden or in the community garden, demonstration garden that you manage. You can use we'd ask you to please use the photo submission form. And this link is here and will be also in the follow-up email. And that gives you an opportunity to upload photos and also tell us a little bit about the plant and the problem. To submit the photos, you do need to have a Google account, which is free and easy to sign up for. If you already are using Gmail, you have a Google account. You don't have to have Gmail, and you can use your other email, but you do need to have a Google account to use a Google form. So there's some nice, easy instructions that are also linked there. So please send your photos in. We will accept them until August 10th, and that gives Mike and Matt a little bit of time to sort through and prepare their presentation for August. So thank you for that. And now it is very nice for me to have the opportunity to welcome Mitch Woodward to the program today. Mitch is the area specialized agent for watersheds and water quality at NC Cooperative Extension. And by means of introduction, Mitch has more than 39 years of water quality protection experience. He's worked on non-point source water quality issues for the DuPont Company, University of Maryland, Penn State University, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Mitch has been the area specialized agent for watersheds and water quality for NC Cooperative Extension for the past 22 years. And he's delivered 20 to 25 educational workshops annually on low impact development, urban stormwater control practices, and water quality protection. Mitch has assisted Cooperative Extension's local town, city, county, and state partners in installing more than 300 urban stormwater control systems in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, Oregon, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alabama, including innovative water harvesting, bioretention, stream bank repair, and residential rain gardens. And we are delighted to have Mitch with us here today to talk about some small scale stormwater solutions that we can share with homeowners. So Mitch, I will allow you to start sharing your screen.
All right, very good. How does the sound sound, everybody? Can you hear me?
Good.
Oh, good. Okay, very good. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. That's what you get when you write your own introduction. So that was fantastic. So let me go right into this here. Okay, so we're going to talk about small scale solutions today. And I can tell you that I really appreciate Master Gardeners. We've spoken with Master Gardener groups across the state and in other states over the years. And we really appreciate everything that you all do. You're real wonderful partners in getting some of this research on the ground. And so really appreciate that. So let's kind of walk down through this. One of the drivers, you always wonder why things happen. Well, about 25 to 30 billion dollars with a B is spent annually in North Carolina on what the state calls water-related tourism. So that's a lot of money. That's a lot of tax money. That's a lot of income for the state. And you wonder why the state's so interested in water quality. Well, it's a good thing. It's good for business. It's good for residents and, of course, landowners. But also, believe me, the state has a vested interest in protecting water quality. And that's a good thing because we can get some money that we can put programs on. And, of course, Master Gardener is part of that. Hard to believe, but almost 300 people continue to move into North Carolina daily. So that's a lot of people. In fact, we are fourth in growth just behind Texas, Florida, and Arizona. You probably hear about Texas and Florida. Maybe you hear about Arizona. You don't hear a lot about North Carolina, but apparently we are number 4. And of course, our population ranks 9th. So it's a popular place to be. And more people bring more what we call impervious area. And these are areas that create runoff, buildings, roads, rooftops. And of course, you may know that sediment is our #1 pollutant in North Carolina. A lot of that comes from stormwater. Some of it comes from agriculture, of course. Sediment's a big deal, but a lot of it does come from stormwater. So being that we're the #4 in population growth, #4, there are stormwater control measures out there, what we call SCM, stormwater control measures. And another driver is there's 170 plus local communities that regulate stormwater, and contractors and others that maintain stormwater control measures. Also interesting is that in some areas, some urban areas, for example, like Wake County, over half of the water used this time of year is used in landscaping and gardens. So that is considered unsustainable by many communities. And so they want to reduce our reliance upon drinking water to irrigate landscapes. So that's a really kind of a shocking number. That's a big number. There's a lot of initiatives out there. And of course, the extension and master gardener roles, training and technical assistance is needed. If you take a look at what the Environmental Protection Agency role in this is, there's this thing called NPDES, Non-Point Discharge Elimination System. And they roll it out in phases. Phase 1 was around 1990. Phase 2 was in about 97, 98. You don't need to know a lot about that other than this affects stormwater management and stormwater regulations. And you can see across the country, these are the larger communities across the country, and you can see North Carolina there, that have to manage stormwater. So this is a lot of where this is coming from. And you can see in North Carolina, of course, from Fayetteville and Cumberland County up through Raleigh, Durham, Winston, and back down to Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and then out west where we get into Hickory, Asheville, those areas, and of course, a few in between. They've talked about phase 3 occurring, which would be many, many more communities. But right now we're in phase 2. And there's a lot of communities that have to manage stormwater under regulations from EPA. If you take a look, and especially, I won't read down through all these bullet points, but in the report that we file to USDA, and of course the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, so this is our federal partner in Washington, D.C., you can see how many service hours that master gardeners contribute, how many volunteers. So I just wanted to mention that, and then the value associated with that. And so congratulations with that. You're a real important part of this, as I said. And you can kind of read down through there some of the things we've been involved in my program area and also our local partners that we work with. So this talk kind of reflects some of these annual reports. So let's talk about what's going on here. Of course, no surprise, land use equals water quality, correct? So human activities in watersheds, and of course that affects the quality of the water that's draining from the top of the watershed down. We have all these things kind of going on out there. One of the interesting thing is anytime a watershed contains 10 to 15% or more imperviousness, so areas that don't collect water, don't absorb water rather, we're going to get streams that will degrade, and of course lots of runoff. So we have these big driveways, lots of roads, big houses, and you'll see suburbia contributing a lot of that. But the #1 pollution source, the #1 source of stormwater mainly are all the roads that we have in North Carolina, thousands of miles of roads, and all those contribute runoff, of course. But that 10 to 15% holds true, has held true over the years. So I thought I'd give you a little idea of what this means. You take a look at Durham. So there's a creek there called Ellerby Creek, if you're not familiar. And this is kind of where that is. Route 147 and the Durham Bulls Athletic Park is down in that area at the bottom of the image. And then Northgate Mall, and then going up. So you're right on the outskirts of Duke University. And you can kind of see where that is. And take a look. Now, this is an old established residential area. It's been around since even after World War I or World War II. So you can take a look at that watershed. The good news is we do have about 50%, 55, 56% of grass and open space that will collect and absorb stormwater, but also take a look. We almost have an equal amount of area within that watershed that sheds water or does not absorb water, like rooftops, roads, and driveways. So there's no mistaking that Ellerby Creek contributes a lot of polluted stormwater to Raleigh's drinking water source, which is Falls Lake. And also, I think a little piece of this goes to Jordan Lake, which is Cary and Apex, Holly Springs, and Western Lake County. So that's 44%. It's almost twice the area of imperviousness that I mentioned before that's called stream bank problems. So these are the kind of things we see out there, and you may see as you're looking at your own property or looking at some of the residential areas, property loss, erosion, and these streams cut down because a stream's like a highway, a little too much traffic on it. It's going to enlarge so that the flow can move through it. And this is exactly what we have here. You also notice too in the bottom photograph, turf grass does not do a really good job at holding stream banks. We need to have some deep wooded, I'm sorry, let me say that again, easy for me to say, deep rooted native perennial plants that can hold those banks. Turf grass won't do the job. And a lot of people mow right down to those streams because of course people want to see the streams. So we have a little bit of a dilemma there. I want to see the water, but of course that can cause erosion with turf grass. So we need to look at something else. Of course, flooding is always an issue in North Carolina, especially as more impervious areas are there. You'll notice that house on the right photograph is for sale. So buyer beware there. How much water can we capture? Well, spared no expense on this graphic. You'll see we've got a 30-gallon root trash can, and we've got a 1 square foot floor tile. If it rains 1 inch on 1 square foot, that's 0.63 gallons, a little bit more than a half a gallon. But in North Carolina, we get 45 to 50 inches a year. So if you multiply that by that number, each square foot of impervious area, it could be driveway, could be parking lot, rooftop, will contribute 30 gallons a year to either your landscape, if you're collecting and infiltrating water, or to the local stream. So this is why we are seeing the erosion and the problems and the flooding that we see. So here is me in my native environment. And I wanted to emphasize that stormwater control measures are practices that we say the 3 S's: slow water down, spread it out, and soak it in. That is a good way to remember what stormwater management does. And these practices don't have to be complicated. They don't even have to be regulated. You can put in rain gardens, rainwater harvesting, capture water off of rooftops, send it out into the landscape under a controlled, of course, in a controlled way, so we don't actually worsen the problem. So that's what I want to talk about. I've got a couple of practices I want to talk about. This kind of summarizes some of the practices that we can employ out there on the landscape. Conserving the established mature vegetation, of course, is top of the list. And then if we have new construction or even existing construction, adding rain gardens, amending soils to absorb more infiltrated and infiltrate more water, rainwater harvesting, maybe pervious pavement and other practices, these can all kind of combine into one. So if it rains 1 inch on this property, it rains 1 inch, let's say, there'd be very little or no runoff to a local stream. So this is kind of where we're going with this. If you're ever in the Raleigh area, and I am going to be leading a tour, I think, at a Master Gardener event later this year in Raleigh. We're going to be near this site. This is the headquarters of the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission. These are the folks that send you your hunting and fishing and boating licenses. And so this is their headquarters. They have a green building, a low impact development or LID building. It includes pervious pavement, includes rain gardens, a wetland, native plants. So we may go over there on this tour and we'll see a couple other things. There's a lot of things to see in the area. We have a green train station of all things in Raleigh. It's been redeveloped. And so there's lots to see. So this may be one of the tour stops. So I'll kind of plug that tour that we're going to, that I'm going to be on later this year. So we have a lot of practices in the ground in Raleigh. Our campus alone has about 110 stormwater control measures. This is a rain garden. And we can see the kind of plants that we have in there. You can see that it's kind of a depressed area. It captures about a foot of runoff from uphill. And that is pretty well maintained, except for the microstesium there. We got that growing, of course, everywhere. So you can see that that is actually a very attractive little rain garden. And that's all that we're really talking about here. It's one practice. You take a look at some of the larger cities. We've got a lot of practices out there now that weren't there 20 years ago. City of Charlotte, there's almost 3,000 of these practices, these stormwater control measures out there. There's a lot, and you can kind of see the list. City of Charlotte Stormwater Services supplied this. And you talk about Philadelphia. I grew up near Philly, and you can see the kind of money that's being invested in trying to make a very old United States city green. And there are a lot of engineering firms up there trying to tap into some of this money and looking at creating green infrastructure. So if you've got children, grandchildren that are interested in the environment, have them take a look at stormwater, have them take a look at low impact development, or if you're a teacher, you're wondering, well, what can people do with this? There is going to be a big push for stormwater management and handling runoff off of impervious areas going to the next generation. So you can see Philadelphia and just as one example of the kind of practices they're looking at there. So that's pretty exciting stuff. What are we going to look at in the time we have here today? I'm going to focus on 4 practices that are simple, small scale, easy to put in on a small scale, and kind of DIY, do-it-yourself kind of stuff. Downspout disconnection off of buildings and rooftops, rain gardens that I've already mentioned, rainwater harvesting, and stream bank repair. So again, looking at the first, downspout disconnection, just disconnecting a downspout that may flow the water directly to a street, putting it out into a lawn so that it, again, slow it down, spread it out, soak it in, the 3 S's. This could be a valuable practice. And again, doesn't cost a thing. This is in Durham. We actually had a study up in Durham to take a look at what we could do. Now we got a little fancy here. We kind of built berms around this little site. So we knew what the area of the roof was, and we needed to have that water go out into an area of lawn that was specific so that we could figure out how much water was infiltrating. We couldn't just let it go out across. So we built these berms in these cooperating landowners' landscapes to figure out how much water we can infiltrate by just, instead of piping the water to the street, because when you pipe it to the street, where does it go? It goes to the storm drain. Where does the storm drain go? It goes to a stream. It is not treated. It doesn't go to the wastewater treatment plant. Some cities it does. For example, Portland has what they call a combined system, Portland, Oregon. They're trying to take that stormwater flow out of that system because it does, in some cases, go to the wastewater treatment plant. This does not. This goes right into somebody's drinking water supply, like Falls Lake in Durham, or for Raleigh from Durham, and then also Jordan Lake. So we've got that there. So we're saying, is this a good thing? Well, sure. We don't have to pipe this to the street like a lot of people were doing. We can have it just spread out across there. Grass is happy. We don't have any kind of erosion potential here. And while you may have to wait a couple of days to maybe mow the grass so you don't get your lawnmower stuck, this is actually a really good stormwater practice and doesn't cost much at all. As you walk around and look at buildings, and this is at a school in Durham, or it might be Greensboro, you can see the large building on the right. This is a grassy swale. This is another stormwater practice. Easy to mow, easy to maintain, nice gentle slope down to a lower elevation. And if you wanted to get fancy, you could even create a bioswale here, where if you didn't want to have grass in there, depending on how wet it is, you could put some native plants and maybe have a nice, beautiful little flower, maybe some rushes, maybe some sedges down in here, some other plants that like wet feet. That type of thing is a little bit more higher maintenance than what many schools want. So the grass is easy because what we call the mow, blow, and go guys get out there with the contractors that they hire. They don't like to pick weeds out of gardens. They like to get on the machines and mow. So this suits that just fine and does really well. So here are our examples of connected downspouts. These are opportunities. Can we maybe disconnect these? Like that one on the bottom left goes to a driveway that goes to the street. Can we disconnect that and maybe take it to a rain garden or have it go out into a lawn area? So we're looking for opportunities when we're out there. So you look at this, and this may not seem like much, but when the water flows during rain events, it kind of comes down that little sidewalk area, skirts that little area by that liriope, and acts like a level spreader, which is another stormwater practice. You may not see it, but that actually is a stormwater practice. It fills up that little trench, that mulch trench, and then sends it out across the rest of the lawn. So it's slowing it, gives it a chance to soak in. So that actually is a stormwater practice. What we want to try to avoid is something like this, where you walk streams in urban areas and you see thousands of these pipes that are near the stream. There's just not enough distance between the end of that pipe and that stream to really do any good in terms of stormwater management. We want to take it back up on the landscape. So that's a good idea. It can be simple. Don't have to overthink this. It can be as simple as protecting and maintaining a natural area that can receive runoff during a rainstorm. The house, rather large house, is on the right-hand side of this. And during construction, I don't know if they meant to do this, but this is actually a front yard rain garden where all the downspouts from the house kind of come into this natural area and fills this and prevents it from running off. And then there's an overflow by where that big rock is in the foreground. So it allows about a foot of water to infiltrate there before it flows off. So that's a good idea. So again, it doesn't back up into the house during larger storms or out into the street. So that's kind of downspout disconnection. We can get almost to 90%, or in some cases more, stormwater infiltration by just sending it out into the landscape. We get a lot of questions about the second practice, which is rainwater harvesting. You can go small, which is like a 50 or 60 gallon rain barrel on the left, or you can go quite a bit larger, which is about a 500, 600 gallon tank on the right. It all depends on your water usage and the size of your roof. I'll show you a few examples here. There's a couple things to keep in mind. Some homeowners associations don't like these agricultural looking tanks. The good news is you can paint them. They're easy to hide with landscaping, the smaller ones. You can go larger ones. You can build an enclosure or maybe just, again, hide it with landscape. There's some maintenance that has to occur. You have to do a little modification on your gutters and downspouts. But again, you can collect about 0.6 of a gallon of water for every inch of square footage on that roof. So there's a lot of water that can be collected. Well, again, we've got the 60 gallon tank upper left. On the right, that's about a 600 gallon tank, and this is in Winston-Salem. And you can see how it's incorporated into the landscape. This homeowner, she loves to use this water. They're irrigating the landscape with it, and she's saved on her water bill as well. But she really likes kind of the environmental ethic of collecting that storm water and not just allowing it to flow down on the street. Here's a 550 gallon tank in my trailer that we're ready to install. The bad news here recently is the cost of these tanks have almost doubled because they're made with petroleum products, and with the shipping and everything else, they've almost doubled, which is a shame. But they still are being used. Again, it's just a little bit more expensive these days. We like the dark tanks. You can see in the background the lighter tanks. We like the darker ones because you won't grow algae in them from sunlight. If you put water in a translucent tank, you're going to grow algae. So these darker tanks, whether they're green or blue, that work a lot better for our purposes. You can link smaller tanks together to create more storage. You can see that these two tanks are connected at the bottom. And the filter is on the top where me and Joe are, you can see, and we just cut the downspout and put it on into the inlet of the top of the left tank. And on the right, that tank is connected at the bottom. And so we have a lot more water to use with various spigots at various elevations. And we can make that to very useful to irrigate his garden that you'll see on the right next door. You can paint these, as I mentioned. This is a garden that we might visit on our Stormwater tour in Raleigh this fall as part of the Master Gardener Conference. And this is Camden Street, an abandoned lot that we turned into a garden, a little garden oasis with the food shuttle. And you can kind of see that they've dressed these up. Got a local artist that came in, and it's awesome. The community loves it. Let's talk about rain gardens here. This is a pretty popular small-scale solution to urban runoff in a landscape, in a homeowner size or residential size landscape. You can see some of the pictures of what we would call rain gardens there. During rainfall, we have that depression, and it's coming off the rooftop, coming off the parking lot, kind of filters down through the grass as a initial filtering to keep the sediment and trash out. And then into the rain garden body, you can put some water loving plants in there that like wet feet for a few days. And I wouldn't suggest, like this in this photograph, that you would have to dig down that deep and put in sandy soil. This is more of a commercial style rain garden that has to drain, and it has the under drain pipe that you see. Most of the residential smaller rain gardens that we put in just use a simple infiltration test. And if that soil drains down within 3 or 4 days, excuse me, that's a good site. You don't have to go to the trouble of putting in this commercial style practice, although some people do, but it's just a lot of digging. Water infiltrates and exfiltrates out into the surrounding soil, and you get less stormwater runoff. So easy to do. Increases infiltration, reduces runoff, and it's just a really pretty landscape feature. And that's why we like these. And again, it can be just as simple as protecting a natural area. This is the same photograph as before, reverse angle, and you can kind of see this rain garden in the front yard of this large house. All the downspouts are routed to this rain garden, and it's just part of the landscape until it rains, and you'll see that fill up and then overflow without getting into the house or onto the road. So it did that really well. Siler City in Chatham County has a kind of a unique rain garden. It's elevated. The water comes off the roof, travels via a piping system up into the rain garden. And you can see Rebecca there. We've got some crepe myrtle that's in there as well, other plants. And that's all fed from a nearby rooftop. So it is possible to pipe the runoff from local rooftops into a rain garden. It doesn't have to flow via the pipe over ground. You can actually plumb these so that you can send the water just about anywhere you want. And here's a school near Carborough where they have a rain garden that goes along the edge of the school. And also you'll see some of the water harvesters there. So when those water harvesters fill, they use that for irrigation, but when they fill during a larger storm, they will actually overflow into this rain garden. And they established a wildflower meadow type of a seed mix here. And it looks kind of wild. Some of the teachers, the administrators said, well, we don't know if we like this, but I think it's grown on them over the years. It certainly attracts insects, and they use that as part of the school curriculum, and it's turned into an outside classroom. So that where they were used to seeing grass, now they're seeing this native plant mix, wildflower plant mix. And it's grown on them over the years, so a little bit of an education process. This was a redevelopment, and this house is new. And you can see the houses behind this house in the foreground. All of these houses up this hill were contributing stormwater down on this newly constructed house. And the homeowner didn't quite know what to do There's just very wet. And one of the things we suggested was to put native water-loving plants down in that wet zone and see if we can create a rain garden, maybe dam up the bottom of that. It does flow across the sidewalk if we get a lot of rain. And that's exactly what she has done. I'm not sure if that bald cypress is a good tree for that location. Not that it doesn't like the soil and the wetness there, because it's a beautiful plant, but it's going to get so big, they might not like that in a few years. It's happy. It was just a little sprig a few years ago, and now you can see it. I do like the rush in the foreground. So juncus is there, beautyberry is there, and there's also some sedges and black-eyed Susan. So Rebecca is there, as well as Itea virginica. So we've got some Virginia sweetspire in there as well. And they love it, and they don't get the lawnmower stuck in that area anymore. So they're really liking that. Homeowners really like it. And it looks nice. Here's some others in various states of care. Some really cared for, others are kind of forgotten. You can kind of see on the left, we got the pipe coming in from the downspouts on the building, and it's functioning, it's working well. Maybe we need to dress it up a little bit with some mulch, but the plants and everything is looking good, are looking good, and maybe we can put some more mulch in there and maybe a few more plants, but it's working. And these are some examples of some really good rain gardens. So let's talk about streams. This is another practice that we get involved in. Lots of urban streams out there, thousands and thousands of miles of these urban streams in North Carolina. This picture epitomizes, illustrates the types of problems we have with urban streams. Lots of runoff from a local cul-de-sac in a neighborhood that was built recently, cuts down through a city park, and you can see the compromised stream banks. You can see that the grass there doesn't hold real well. They put in some bald cypress or maybe some silk, I don't know if it's silky willow, it might be willow oaks, but they're far enough back from the bank that they're really not contributing, and they're small, of course, at this point, newly planted. They're not contributing any roots to the cause here. And so we've got a localized stream bank erosion problem that we really need to address. And we see this thousands and thousands of times over the years. So what we need to do is think in terms of how we can stabilize these banks using native materials, native species that are prolific rooters, and not really filling these streams up with riprap, because regulations now on streams are such that you can't do that anymore. But you can put natives in without any type of regulation, as long as you're not changing the course of the stream. There are more regulations associated with streams. Many of you may not know this, but the water in the stream is considered waters of the state. You may own the land on both sides or one side, but you don't own that water. That water is waters of the state, and that is under the jurisdiction of not only the state, but the Army Corps of Engineers, which is a federal agency that regulates perennial and intermittent streams. So you need to be careful when you're down along these stream banks and know what you can and cannot do. You can put native plants in without an issue. You just can't work down in what's called in the wet. You can't work down in the stream without a permit. But there's a lot we can do without permitting. You'll see a lot of homeowner, homegrown type of practices that don't really do anything. I'm not sure what these bricks, it's kind of like the kind of bricks you use in like a fire pit, to create a fire pit or something. Maybe it's to keep the son or the daughter that's mowing the grass from going down into the creek. That may be the only usefulness or useful part of putting these stones along here. The good news is there's lots of root material there along that bank. We don't want to compromise that. In fact, we want to add native plants to that. So that might be a situation where we can put some live stakes in, which is perfectly fine, not regulated. You can put live stakes in here, native plants, and that would help to reduce the erosion and maybe beautify this area, but we see this all the time. You take a look, so what's going on here? We call this laughingly Roundup gone wild. Somebody probably saw a snake and they started spraying this. This is in a park. And you can see that what little grass was holding that bank now is gone. And now it's really going to start to erode. So again, the long-term answer here is to stabilize those banks with natives. And we actually have a workshop to teach people on how to do this. Here we are in Wake Forest. You can see that the bank is eroding. Everything was fine until they built a development upstream. And every acre of impervious area or parking lot adds another 27,000 gallons of flow downstream for every 1 inch rain. That's 27,000 gallons that wasn't there before, and it's a big parking lot up there. So you can see his place is eroding. So that gives you a kind of reverse angle. This is some serious erosion, probably at the edge of what we can hope to accomplish by stabilizing it with native plants and native materials. Sometimes you need to go with an engineered solution, but we wanted to try it. The homeowner there was interested in trying it. And you can see that we've got a couple juncus and other plants down at the bottom of the toe of the slope, kind of hanging on for dear life. So we thought, well, let's put some more in there. So we got our materials together. That is coir, which is coconut. We're hoping that with the CBD oil industry here and industrial hemp in North Carolina and the South, that maybe they can start making this out of industrial hemp, which would be kind of cool. Otherwise, we're relying upon places like Sri Lanka that are giving us these matting, this coconut matting. And we have wooden stakes. We have our sledgehammers. These are what we call live stakes. In the back, those are 6-foot fascines. That's just what they're called. And in the foreground, the 2-foot live stakes. You notice the snow on the ground. This is up near Pilot Mountain. And we have a grower there that we work with. There are a number of native plant nurseries that you can go to. So look up native plant nurseries. These are called live stakes and fascines. And these are typically silky willow, silky dogwood, button bush, 9-bark. Those are the big four. And we drive those into the ground during the dormant time of the year. So basically mid-December through, depending on where we are in the state, mid-March, we can install these and they will root from those cuttings. So those are actually cuttings, and those are native plants. And so here we are, we kind of throw them in the bank. We throw them down in the water on the bank. We're kind of storing them for a couple of days until we get enough help. And here we are driving them into the bank on this eroding bank. Here I am out on a property where we have eroding ditch bank. And if you're smart and you wait till after a rain, they're very easy to insert. You can just insert them with your hand. Sometimes you don't even need a hammer. And we're right there at the edge of the water line. That's where you put them, where the erosion occurs, not down in the bottom where it's wet all the time, but up on the bank within 2 feet of the water, typically 1 or 2 feet. And you can kind of see the process there. So they're alive, no roots yet, so they need wet soil for survival. About 2/3 to 3/4 of the length of the stake goes into the bank. And make sure that you put the rooting end down. That may seem obvious, but we've had some people put in hundreds of these stakes upside down. So you need to understand, and two, when we harvest these, we actually have gone to using spray paint on the top of these, and actually on the end that actually is going to grow. Of course, we got the distal and the basal, so it'll be the distal end, the top end. So we say, root side down, so we can identify that for folks that may not be able to look at the buds and understand what's up and what's down. And again, we want to focus on establishing these plants at the toe of the slope. You can get these stakes yourself if you're good at plant identification and know what a silky willow or a silky dogwood looks like. Go out and harvest these during December, January, February, install them yourself. You can plant some of these and create like a live stake nursery, or you can buy these commercially for from 50 cents to 75 cents a piece. And you put them in about 3 feet apart and they will grow these shrubs. We have, and again, they're not trees. These aren't like, don't think bulb cypress. These are woody multi-stem shrubs. almost like, I mean, dare I say, like a privet. It kind of has that same growth habit like a privet, but it's a native. It's not like privet in that regard, but prolific rooters. We hold workshops on how to install these plants. Here we are at several workshops that we teach on stream bank repair. And one of our students was in Carborough, and they had a little blowout on their stream. You can see they're mowing right up to the edge of the stream. Always a sign that trouble could be on the way. Put live stakes in, and you can see kind of the bank there. They put the live stakes in, and I need to go back and take a look at this, but that is coir matting. And what's cool about that is you can put the coir down, stabilizes the bank, and it's a beautiful property near Chapel Hill, and then install the stakes right through the bank, and you're not disturbing the soil. To give you an idea of how these grow, here's a bank blowout that we had in a city park. And that was a concern because it might take out that walking path that you see. So had a workshop out there. So here we have the live stakes and the taller fascines going in, towing them into the mud at the toe of the slope. And then we even have string and coir and stakes where we kind of fashion them and secured them to the bank using other live stakes and wooden stakes. And here is the site a year later, so you can kind of see the progression before, during, and then after. And here, after about 3 years, look at the size of those. Now we have a live stake nursery. We go in there with the students, we harvested these. This was a fundraiser, and then they were selling these live stakes to other people that locally wanted to secure and stabilize their stream banks. So that's kind of what you can expect, and that's their growth habit. This is silky willow, and that's what that looks like. This is another stream site in Apex where it was cutting towards the house. And again, we stabilized that bank so it wouldn't take out his deck and go near the house. They had lost a couple trees, and you can see 1 year later that it's holding the bank and doing really well. These practices can also be used in situations like this where you have a backyard runoff and you want to kind of maybe do something other than grass. You could create a bioswale or put in some live stakes. And so this is a good situation for looking at maybe some water loving plants downhill. And again, rain gardens, runoff control, downspout disconnection, rainwater harvesting. Those are the top 4 practices that could be used in an urban residential area to try to collect some water to use for irrigation purposes, but then also control stormwater. So with that, I have no idea what time it is. So I don't know if we have any time for questions.
You have done so well, Mitch.
Did I
Thank
do okay?
you. You did
Okay.
wonderfully. And I am so
do
pleased that you broke it down in those very doable solutions that we can share with others. I've been watching the chat, and I have a couple questions I'd love to present to you.
Sure.
So let's see.
Well, coir is spelled, oh, that's right. Somebody answered that. C-O-I-R. That's the college word for coconut.
That's right.
Now you could use Excelsior matting. They also have matting that has straw incorporated in it. That works as well. It's not as long-lived or tough as coir. Coir is coconut. And you can buy these at some of the major retailers or wholesalers. I probably shouldn't mention individual names, but Green Resource is a company that sells to the trade. They will sell to individual homeowners, but you may not like the volume that you may have to buy. This coir matting is 6.5 feet long and or wide and 160 feet long. They're not going to divide it for you. So, you know, this is a commercial landscape outfit, but that's where we get it. I also saw coir fabric for sale on Amazon. It's a lot more expensive than you can buy locally though, because that coir mat is heavy. So they're going to charge you shipping, even though they say free shipping. It's a lie.
Good point on the shipping.
They're charging you for shipping.
Yes.
So you can try it.
Mitch, Wanda is asking, how bad or is the roof runoff water detrimental to vegetable gardens? Should that be a concern?
This is a question that comes up a lot. And there are studies out there. All of the papers that I have read indicate that it's not really a concern. There's not a lot of pollutants that are in that water. And of course, there's all kinds of roofing materials, right? Metal rooftops, like powder coated roof, there's really nothing there. Asphalt shingle, they've looked at some of that. We send it in our garden. The thing is, like with the tomato, the tomato actually is not in contact with that water. The worst thing that's in stormwater is bacteria. So when you think about it, the plant itself that you eat, that fruit is not in contact with that water. And so just wash it off and you're fine. I don't know about potatoes and carrots and other types of vegetables that would be in contact with the soil, but very low, and actually lower than something like, for example, the worst case would be where they use human waste or septage to fertilize fields, which is illegal on crops for animals or humans. Can't use it for that, but it's a lot less than that. When you have these companies that clean out Johnny on the spots or septic systems, they take that and they land apply that. Or send it to a septic system. It's a lot lower than that. So very small concern with asphalt shingles, and also a lot of these asphalt shingle roofs are older, and the older ones, I understand, produce very little runoff, even in acid rain, because it's worn, and whatever came off at first, it's done now, so it's kind of inert. So not much of a concern at all, is my understanding.
So speaking of bacteria, that question came up regarding the rain barrels or the cisterns. Are we concerned about mycobacterium? Someone mentioned that would be growing in that tank.
Well, I'm more concerned about mosquitoes in the tanks than bacteria. Okay. I would get a dark colored tank or paint. If you have a translucent tank, you find a deal, paint it, and you won't have that issue. If you have algae growing, you could put just a couple splashes of regular household bleach that would take care of that. Of course, you shouldn't be drinking out of that tank, because you are going to have bacteria in that tank. But I'm actually more concerned about mosquitoes, because you'll get some of these urban mosquitoes like Zika, equine encephalitis, other types of diseases that can be mosquito-borne. So you want to make sure that you're not creating a mosquito habitat. Use the water, and you might have to use a product like mosquito dunks, D-U-N-K-S, that are available and cheap. It's actually a bacterium that will control mosquito larvae, and that's a good way to go as well. But using the water will also help. So I'm actually more concerned about that, right, with mosquitoes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that we will end on this one, which is, how about the situation we've got with stream banks that might be already populated with invasives, and we'd like to maybe combat the invasive and stabilize the stream bank. How do you tackle that kind of a scenario?
That's a very good question. We deal with that all the time. And let's say, for example, and this happens all the time, privet will have infested a bank, and common sense would tell you, I could take care of that privet. I could wipe that privet out using a number of different techniques, but I don't think that's a very good idea. If you do it all at once, I would do a phased approach where, for example, maybe you take a little bit of privet out at a time, maybe cut it down with a pair of loppers, and then start installing your live stakes maybe in late December, January, February, when the native plant nurseries have these stakes available. Get those natives growing, get them rooted, and then start taking out the privet by maybe some selective application of Roundup or Rodeo as a basal treatment when you cut these, and that'll work like a charm. And then slowly kind of peck away at it. The stream regulations say you do not want to create a chance that you'll erode that stream bank. And by taking all those invasives out at once, you could do that. And you don't want to put in container plants because they will be scooped out by any kind of rising stormwater. You could put native plants up higher on the bank, but not down low, like on this picture behind me, that edge. You want to have container plants up here and trees, but not down here, because that's where the erosion will occur. So you can buy flats of, let's say, rush, and put rushes in down at that water soil interface. That would be a great thing to do, or live stakes, but no container plants, no trees, you know, down
And
low.
so I think you're speaking to, when you say container plants, nothing with that root ball that's maybe bigger than 6 inches, or root
Yeah.
mass. That's so more towards plugs or the live stake approach.
Exactly.
Smaller,
And
the better.
you can plant hundreds of rush down at the edge of that water so quickly. And in fact, I don't have it, and I see Charlotte is giving everybody links, which is awesome. Thank you, Charlotte. If you go to NCSU Stream Bank Repair Workshop, so put that in your search engine, NCSU Stream Bank Repair Workshop. You'll see the link to the workshop come up. If you click on that link, it'll take you to our workshop. We're going to be scheduling workshops in the fall and in the winter, so they're coming. We have one site in Black Mountain. We have another site in Raleigh. There'll be more added. So you're welcome to participate. In fact, I think we give Master Gardeners a scholarship to these things. So check that out. And if you page down, scroll down to a section called resources, you'll see videos. You'll see our small scale solutions to eroding stream bank manual. You'll see me stumbling around a stream bank trying to figure out what's going on. So you'll enjoy that. So take a look at the resources section on that website. And there, Charlotte has added that. So click on that link that she just provided and go down to the resources section, and you'll see the streams that are fixable, maybe some that are not. Not all streams are fixable with natives, great big eroding banks. Just be aware that streams are regulated. You can put natives in, but you can't go down there with a track hoe and start digging around and throwing rocks in. That is going to require a permit, but there's plenty of things you can do on small streams that don't require that.
Great. Excellent. Well, we are going to compile all those resources as we usually do for all of you and send them out in the follow-up email. And Mitch, I just want to thank you so much for your time today, your preparation, and very practical solutions that we can implement ourselves and share with the public.
Well, thanks to you and Charlotte and the Master Gardeners for all that you do. So very much appreciated. So thank you. Glad to be with you today. Yep.
Take care, Matt. Take care.
See ya. Bye-bye.
And now we will transition into the Plant These Instead feature with Charlotte. And so I will let her get set up with her screen. We are capturing these resources from Mitch, and we will ask him about his presentation if he's willing to share that. And if he is, absolutely, I'll get that out to you. And now it looks like Charlotte's ready to take it away.
Yes, thank you, Caroline. And thanks so much to Mitch for an excellent presentation, as always. So to go along with Mitch's topic of small scale water stream bank solutions and other management for stormwater. We're going to talk about some plants that are great for planting in those type of situations, especially native plants. So our plant these instead is featuring things to plant instead of yellow flag iris. So yellow flag iris is pretty popular as a plant that people like to put at the edge of ponds or along waterways, or maybe in a rain garden or on a stream. But the issue is that it is invasive. It is not native. It's from Eurasia, and it has become invasive in much of the eastern United States, and it can repopulate really quickly. Like many of these invasive plants that occur in wetland habitats and are adapted to wetland areas are especially threatening to those types of habitats because they just reproduce so quickly. They have evolved to reproduce in those situations. So a lot of times their seeds may float, so they can just float downstream and just distribute all over the place, or they have little root parts or plantlets that easily break off and just wash downstream and get into the edge of the bank, start a new plant, and it just kind of keeps moving that way. So we find that these plants, these invasive plants adapted to wetlands, are especially bad for those type of habitats because they are just even faster than most invasives at reproducing and invading those habitats. So we don't want to plant yellow flag iris, but we have some great native options we can plant instead. And these include, we're going to focus on perennials, flowering perennials today, but of course there are many, many woody plants, trees and shrubs, as well as things like sedges and rushes, grasses, and ferns. So I encourage you to go to the plant toolbox and explore some of those other options. But let's look at some of the flowering plants we can use. If you want iris, and like maybe you want that iris foliage, that nice vertical foliage, well, you certainly have options. There are some native irises, the blue flag iris. They all look really similar. They're closely related. Probably the most common one you're going to find available is blue flag iris, sometimes called southern blue flag iris, Iris virginica. It occurs actually throughout North Carolina and the whole eastern half of the United States and into Canada, so really wide distribution. And in the wild, you'll find it, just in sunny, moist spots, like sometimes even in ditches or at the edges of natural waterways. And it's pretty tough and adaptable. It can grow in areas that occasionally have shallow standing water, or maybe even permanently have shallow standing water up to about 6 inches on average. If the water levels rise up to say maybe around a foot for short times, it's going to be okay, but it's not one that's going to grow out into deeper water. It's also quite happy just in soil that stays moist. Or well-drained soil that's moisture retentive. So it's not going to be happy in sand or sites that are really dry. But anywhere that just has some moisture through much of the growing season is going to be great for it. Like most irises, it doesn't have a super long bloom period. So usually you see it bloom for about 2 to 3 weeks in May. And as I mentioned, there's some really similar species. Iris tridentata is known as the Savannah iris, and that one occurs from southeastern North Carolina down to Florida. So it definitely has a much more southern distribution. And then what's called the northern blue flag, Iris versicolor, pretty much has the same native range as the southern blue flag. It's just a slightly different species. So blue flag iris, definitely a nice alternative for yellow flag iris. As this one is native. If you do have areas where you are looking for a plant that will grow in standing water, like all year round standing water, there's a lot of options. I'm going to highlight pickerel weed, which is one of the most popular ones, and it's very easy to find at garden centers that maybe carry some water garden plants. And pickerel weed blooms all summer. So it has a really long bloom period. It's blooming now. And you will see it, in the wild, just in areas that are permanently wet, swamps, bogs, again, sometimes even some of the ditches along I-40 down going towards Wilmington. It grows on the sides of the road. It also has a really wide distribution found throughout North Carolina and much of the eastern United States and Canada. And this one is better in areas that permanently have a little bit of shallow water. It will grow in up to 12 inches deep, kind of standing water areas, but it's not going to be very happy in areas that dry out for very long at all. It'll persist. I mean, it could actually, is quite drought tolerant, but it's going to do much better where there's constant moisture. As I mentioned, the really long bloom period, and it attracts a lot of bees and butterflies. So you get a lot of pollinators coming and visiting this plant. So it's really attractive for us to look at, and it's great to create that type of foraging habitat for pollinators. I just had to throw this picture in that I found on the plant toolbox. That's from the Cameron Art Museum in Wilmington. I'm sure this giant yellow rubber ducky is some type of art installation, but there in the background looking out, it's admiring the pickerel weed. And so now we'll talk about a few plants. So say that you have somewhere that maybe occasionally floods, or it's just kind of moist, like a rain garden. Rain gardens definitely have varying water level. You know, they're designed to drain. So a lot of water comes in, it's wet, there may be standing water for a very short period, and then it drains away, and it just goes through these cycles of wet and then drying out. So that's where something like swamp milkweed can work. A great thing about swamp milkweed is an Asclepias incarnata. Again, another one with a really wide native range through most of the United States, except for the very west coast. It is a larval plant for monarchs, and we know monarchs are really struggling, and we need a lot more milkweed, a lot more Asclepias in our landscapes to support them, to support their development in the caterpillars. So I have quite a bit of Asclepias incarnata in my landscape, and always, well, I have not yet this year had any monarch caterpillars, but typically do get quite a few monarch caterpillars on the species, as well as other species of Asclepias. It's pretty adaptable. It'll grow in sun or part shade. And again, you know, it's okay if the soil stays wet. It's okay if it's well drained but moisture retentive. Again, this isn't one I'd plant in really, really sandy soils. In those situations, you could use the butterfly weed, the orange flowered species of Asclepias. It's great in clay, and it has these pink flowers. It kind of flushes of bloom from late spring through the summer and sometimes into the fall. And again, in addition to being a host for the monarch caterpillars, the flowers themselves provide tremendous amounts of nectar, and you'll get a lot of pollinators visiting them. And on top of all of it, the deer don't particularly like to eat it. So great one for any type of garden or landscape where you're looking for a flowering perennial that has a lot of beauty and pollinator benefits. And if you are on the coast and you are in some of these situations where you have brackish water, so kind of the salt water mixing with the fresh water, there are lots of options there too. Lots of very beautiful, unique plants native to those habitats. And one of them is seashore mallow. Has one of my favorite botanical names to say, Kosteletzkia, Kosteletzkia pentacarpos. The seashore mallow has these beautiful pink flowers. You can tell just by looking at it, it's related to hibiscus. It's in the mallow family. It naturally occurs in those brackish to almost freshwater swamps and streams along much of the U.S. eastern and Gulf coasts. So it's pretty hard. Everything we've looked at today is very hardy. This one's hardy to zone 6A. It doesn't have to grow in the saltwater or brackish water. It's perfectly happy just in average garden soil. Especially if it's moisture retentive. So it's going to do best where it's sunny with wet soils to well drained but moisture retentive. So again, it's not going to be really happy just in sandy soils, but clay, your average clay soil, it's going to do really well. Another one that attracts a lot of pollinators, has a pretty long bloom period from midsummer into the fall. And you will often read that this species is short-lived. I have never experienced that, and I have grown it for many, many years. I do not find it to be short-lived. It will self-seed a little bit. You know, you'll get seedlings popping up here and there, but they're easy to either move or pull up if you don't want them or give to somebody. And another interesting thing about it is there's a white-flowered form, but it is native, as I mentioned, up and down the East Coast and Gulf Coast. And I have noticed that the plants that are selected from populations from, say, North Carolina and South have much larger flowers. And the further north you go, the flowers tend to be a lot smaller. So just some genetic variation in the population and how it's distributed along the coast. Most of what's sold in the trade is selected for the bigger flowered forms, like you see in the picture here, which when we say bigger flowered, it's like, 2 to 3 inches across for the flowers, but they'll have lots of them on the plant. The individual flowers are open for a day, but it makes lots and lots of them, new flowers every day. So as I mentioned, there are many more plants, woody plants, shrubs, trees, grasses, sedges, ferns that you can grow in these types of habitats, these wet sites, either just wet or poorly drained garden areas or stream banks or rain gardens. And you can explore many of these on the plant toolbox. One way to find them is to go and choose your find a plant option and then select for the landscape theme that you want a native garden and a water garden. And that's going to give you 88 different plants to explore. You can also change the settings under the cultural conditions to indicate the moisture area. There's a lot of ways you can use the Find a Tool plant to get a larger or smaller list of plants. So whether you want to go broader or much more refined to your specific conditions. So encourage you to explore that. And these slides, like all our Plant These Instead slides, are posted to our Plant These Instead archive. And you can go and explore the slides from last year and this year and all of the suggestions we have. Anything that is blue and underlined is a link. So all of the plants that are listed in the slides will be linked to the plant toolbox. So you can easily get to their profile and find out complete details about them, height, hardiness, anything you need to know. So encourage you to visit the Plant These Instead archive to learn more. And we'll close out with just some announcements. The Extension Master Gardener program, as we've mentioned a couple of times, we have the Extension Master Gardener College coming up. We're so excited to be able to offer this in person, and it will be October 27th through 29th. Our theme is gardening in a changing climate. So we will be discussing growing plants in more challenging climate conditions that we are facing, what that means, what we can do to make a difference, and with a real focus on types of resources and educational materials you can take back and use in your community for outreach. So we will be at the Hunt Library, which is on NC State's Centennial Campus in Raleigh. And the really exciting news is we have registration set to open August 1st, which is next Monday. It'll run August 1st through September 26th. So we encourage everyone to go and register. The link for registration will be posted on the EMG intranet on Monday, along with additional details, a registration guide that will have the full schedule and another website where you can go and learn additional information about the conference, where you can stay. You will be making your own hotel reservations. We do have the registration fee set at $215, and it includes all of your lunches and refreshments and snacks and one evening reception. So there's quite a few meals included in there, and we've worked hard to keep that registration fee as low as we possibly can and cover our expenses. So we hope to see many of you there in October. Also want to extend a hearty welcome to George Place. George has joined the Extension Gardener team and will be leading the online Extension Gardener series of classes. So this will be a new series of classes based on the Extension Gardener Handbook, and which is the handbook and curriculum used for Extension Master Gardener training. He'll also support the online therapeutic horticulture classes. George, you may sound familiar to you. He's actually been in Extension for several years and was most recently the County Extension Director in Catawba County, and has just a lot of exciting experience that will, makes him perfect for this position. And I know he would be doing a wonderful job, and we look forward to announcing these types of Extension Gardener classes to you in upcoming Plants, Pests, and Pathogens webinars. He will be working with Laura Barth. So Laura leads the online Plant ID classes. That's the partnership with Longwood Gardens. So Laura shared this slide to let everybody know about the upcoming classes for the fall. This will be starting October 10th through November 21st. So all of the Plant ID courses will be offered this fall, and you can even sign up for self-study versions of the courses. So the self-study is a little bit cheaper. And of course, all of the courses have a discount for Master Gardener volunteers. And you can already register, so you don't have to wait to register. for the synchronous version, well, they are all asynchronous, so you don't meet at specific times, but for the instructor-led versions, that'll be held October 10th through November 21st. You can register now, and you can register anytime for the self-study versions of these classes, which are going to be totally on your own. And we're really excited to be able to start thinking about traveling again. And another Extension Gardener offering is the International Travel Study Adventure to Costa Rica. So this is a tour this was for the first tour that was offered as an Extension Gardener tour for Master Gardener volunteers and the general public. So it's not limited to Master Gardener volunteers. This is a wonderful tour. I was very fortunate to be able to go on it in 2018. And we are looking to offer it February the 16th through the 23rd, 2023. And there's more information posted online where you can see the actual itinerary, all the places that are going to be visited. And there is a contact there for the company that is organizing this tour, that if you want to learn more, it's got a name. There's a name and some contact information to follow up. Of course, J.C. Ralston Arboretum continues to offer their wonderful continuing education programs, many of which are online, some that are in person. They are at the Arboretum in Raleigh, so encourage you to visit their website to check those out. And our garden help directory is available to everyone. It's for the public to go and find how to get in touch with the right person in your county if you have gardening questions. So we encourage you to visit the garden help directory. And if you notice some additional information needs to be added for your county, please let us know. Send us an email or just drop the information in chat right now, and we'll make sure to get it updated. Okay, as Caroline mentioned at the opening of the webinar, next month we will be featuring the images that you submit. So encourage everybody to get those submitted by, it's what is it, like August 11th, I think, Caroline?
Yep,
We'll be
August 10th,
accepting
please.
August 10th, thank you. Please get those submitted by August 10th, and we look forward to discussing them next month and seeing what's going on in your garden. Then we will finish out the fall with September 27th. We're going to be talking about climate change mitigation for gardeners and homeowners. And our last webinar is, we've moved the date up a week from our typical fourth Tuesday to October 18th. And we'll round the season out with the current pest and plant disease issues. So we look forward to seeing you next month and the following month and at Extension Master Gardener College, we hope. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us today, and hope everyone's having a great summer and continues on, and August is wonderful for you.